My boss's son had no clue I spoke 7 languages. He fired me on the spot. But the next day, the CEO asked, "Why did you let him go? Didn't you see the contract?" The CEO's son responded, "Wait, what? I will make him regret it. I strongly dislike your behavior. You must choose between being terminated or demoted." I was stunned when the executive vice president, Chris, spoke to me in that manner. Tomorrow is the final stage of the business deal, and he suddenly demanded to take over my role as the lead negotiator. I never anticipated such an emotional outburst from him. "What's the problem? This is your fault. You're being punished for outperforming me." Chris, who is the same age as me, just couldn't handle my success. I have no desire to work for a company where my superiors steal my accomplishments. I'm resigning. I'll leave tomorrow's negotiation to you, Executive Vice President. With that, I quickly exited the conference room. Just before the negotiation, President John appeared puzzled as his son. Chris proudly declared he would handle it himself. "What do you mean? Mark was supposed to manage this matter. I fired him yesterday," Chris said proudly, causing his father to glare at him. "Why did you fire him? Didn't you review the negotiation materials?" Frantically flipping through the documents, Chris found a critical sentence he had overlooked and his face turned pale. "My name is Mark, a 43-year-old employee. I've actually switched jobs 3 times already, but it wasn't due to layoffs or a company's closure. The real reason is a bit complicated, so I often said it was for career progression." During my 4th interview, most employers accepted this explanation without issue. However, one person, Vice President David, saw through my statement. "No, that's not the case," he said. "You don't seem like the type to change jobs solely for career advancement. And if that were the reason, you'd be aiming higher. Our company and your previous one are similar in size, just dealing with different products. What's the real motivation behind your job changes?" Realizing honesty was the best approach, I shrugged and shared the true reason with him. David listened intently, considering my explanation. "I understand your reasoning and why you concealed it. All right, I'll take care of it." With a sly grin, David concluded the interview, leaving me uncertain if I had met the requirements. I anxiously waited a couple of days, and when the notification arrived, I was stunned. It stated that they wanted to hire me as a sales manager. What does this mean? I applied for a supervisory position in the sales department. I called to clarify if there was a mistake. David laughed heartily. "The current sales manager is about to retire. Given your background, Mark, there's no issue with you taking his place. Furthermore, a manager's role is to lead, not to be led. You understand what I mean, right?" Comprehending David's reasoning, I gratefully accepted the job offer. The workplace I joined was not at all uncomfortable. I found it peculiar that there were few employees my age, but interacting with the younger staff was refreshing. Even though I entered with a managerial status, I anticipated facing challenges with the transition, but there were no issues whatsoever. My younger leadership style was preferred by my team, who valued my openness to new ideas. However, one individual, Chris, took issue with my approach. When I started giving orders after the previous sales manager's retirement, Chris openly criticized me, insisting that I should have sought his instructions before submitting the monthly business negotiation reports to the executive meeting. The other executives were puzzled by Chris' complaint, and I had no choice but to ask him directly what instructions he was referring to. Feeling frustrated, Chris unleashed a barrage of complaints towards me. He warned, "You were new to the role, like an inexperienced driver. Before you make any decisions, check with me or the other executives first." Comparing my extensive experience to a rookie driver was quite a stretch. As I pondered how to respond, David skillfully intervened. David vouched for me, stating that my predecessor, EVP Chris, endorsed me. He also mentioned that the sales staff found me easier to work with now. Convinced, the other executives agreed, but President John remained dissatisfied. Chris faced reprimand for his outburst. John advised talented people can't perform well if constantly second-guessed. Moving forward, he stated that the sales department would handle all negotiations. Mark understood and seemed ready to take on the responsibility. However, it appeared Chris was frustrated that David and John had backed me up as he began causing minor disruptions across the department. How many times has this happened now? I wondered. I noticed a growing sense of frustration on my team's faces lately. It seemed like we were constantly facing small but persistent obstacles. Samples for negotiations arriving late or promotional material going missing. Even though the sales department handles the negotiations, we rely heavily on the support of other departments like materials and general affairs. Lately, that support has been lacking. I believe the root of the issue lies with Chris. Each department has its own supervisors, but no one seems to go against Chris's directives. Whenever he instructs them to delay samples or prioritize other orders, they comply. I can't entirely blame them, but it would have been helpful if they had at least informed the sales team ahead of time. My team has been trying to work around these challenges using alternative samples or other solutions. However, we've now uncovered what appears to be deliberate sabotage that could jeopardize our negotiations. We had reserved a hotel room for a meeting, but the reservation was suddenly canceled. When we followed up with the hotel, they told us that someone from our company had canceled it. I have no doubt that Chris is behind this. Confronting Chris directly was the only way to address the sabotage and prevent further delays in the negotiations. Despite his denials, the evidence clearly pointed to his involvement in the last-minute hotel room cancellation. Determined to uncover the truth, I entered his office ready to confront him. As expected, he claimed ignorance, blaming it on a simple mistake by my team. However, the facts didn't align with his story. The sudden cancellation, the limited knowledge of the room details, and the finance department's connection to Chris all suggested his culpability. Faced with the mounting evidence, Chris fell silent, unable to refute the accusations. Informing our clients about the change could raise suspicions, but I couldn't let his actions jeopardize the team's hard work. Resolving this issue was crucial to ensuring the success of the negotiations. I recognized the significance of the upcoming negotiation, so I chose to prioritize securing its successful completion over confronting Chris more forcefully. This negotiation is crucial, and any further interference from you will leave me no choice but to escalate the matter to the president. I can provide the recorded call as evidence at the executive meeting. Although Chris appeared to back down, I couldn't dismiss the possibility of him continuing his disruptive actions. True to my concerns, he decided to usurp control of the negotiation at the worst possible moment. Despite the challenges we'd already overcome, such as the hotel room change, the negotiation was nearing its conclusion, and I had expected the top executives to finalize the contract the following day. However, first thing in the morning, Chris summoned me to his office, and I cannot entrust this important negotiation to you. I will take over. You need to worry about it. I don't understand. What's wrong? I said. Perplexed, Chris frowned. That's the issue. Why can't you simply follow your boss instructions? You have a choice. Get fired or be demoted. We don't require your services for this job. I was taken aback. Tomorrow was the final stage of the negotiations, and Chris' demand to take over the situation left me speechless. I never anticipated such an emotional outburst from him. What's the problem? You're being punished for outshining me, Chris said, revealing his jealousy. Chris, being the same age as me, couldn't tolerate my success. He had been secretly sabotaging me, and now, seeing me close to sealing the deal, he decided to act directly. When I remained silent, Chris spoke with a gleeful expression. You are getting arrogant just because you can speak English, right? Your resume shows you've worked at 3 different trading companies. We have plenty of people who can speak English at your level. I almost asked how he knew the details of my resume, but then I realized that, after leaving the conference room, Mark, felt a mix of frustration and relief as I walked out of the company for the last time. The doors closing behind me didn't just mark the end of a job, but the conclusion of a constant battle against Chris, a rival more concerned with feeding his ego than ensuring the success of his father's company. That night, as I packed up my belongings and prepared for the next phase of my life, I decided not to let things end so quietly. I knew Chris wasn't prepared to take over the negotiation. He hadn't studied the contract details, didn't understand the cultural nuances of the foreign clients, and, most importantly, underestimated the complexity of negotiating in a language he barely mastered. Instead of moving on quietly, I chose to make sure Chris's failure would be evident to everyone. The next day, as expected, Chris took the lead in the negotiation room. The international clients arrived punctually, and I decided to stay in the building's lobby to keep an eye on things. It didn't take long before I saw signs that things were going downhill. Chris began speaking in English, but his insecurity was evident. He mixed up technical terms and failed to connect with the clients. From outside the meeting room, I could see the clients' expressions growing more and more displeased. At one point, out of desperation, Chris stood up to try to assert himself more forcefully, but he made a fatal mistake. Unfamiliar with the client's cultural sensitivities, he made a comment that they found highly offensive. The executives on the other side of the table stood up and left the room, visibly upset. The multi-million-dollar contract I had carefully prepared was falling apart before Chris's eyes. I couldn't help but smile discreetly as I heard the commotion upstairs. The news spread quickly, and soon, President John came downstairs, furious, looking for answers about the disaster. When he saw me in the lobby, he stopped in front of me, trying to contain his frustration. "Mark, you knew this would happen, didn't you?" he asked, his eyes showing a mix of regret and desperation. "I knew Chris wasn't ready for this," I replied calmly. "But he made his choice when he pushed me out, and you allowed it to happen?" The president just shook his head, realizing he had been complicit in his son's arrogance. He quickly went back upstairs, but it was too late. The negotiation was officially ruined. In the following days, the impact of Chris's failure rippled through every department in the company. Word of his mishandling of one of the company's biggest deals spread among the employees and, soon enough, to competitors. The company's image took a hard hit, and clients began questioning the stability of a business that allowed personal issues to interfere with professionalism. While Chris dealt with the chaos inside the company, I didn't stay idle. I leveraged my language skills and experience to quickly secure a position at a competing firm that was eager for someone with my background. Soon, I was leading negotiations for them, using my expertise and market knowledge. What Chris and his father didn't anticipate was that I would use what I knew from the old company to help my new employers win over the same clients they had lost. When the former clients, those Chris had driven away, realized I was on the other side, their trust was quickly restored. In no time, we signed an even larger contract, causing Chris's company to lose a significant portion of its market share. The new company I joined became a leading player, while Chris's company struggled to survive. Eventually, I heard rumors that President John had called an emergency meeting with the main shareholders to address the company's situation. He had to admit that his son's arrogance had come at a high cost, and now he was desperately seeking a way to turn things around. But Chris, with his wounded pride, refused to take responsibility and continued to blame everyone around him for the failure. That was when the final downfall occurred. The shareholders, furious about the loss in value, demanded Chris be removed from his role as executive vice president. Even President John was forced to step down temporarily as the company sought new leadership to save its reputation. The news reached me through former colleagues who described the atmosphere of panic in the company's halls. But the crowning moment came when one of the most important clients, whom Chris had mistreated, suggested that my new company buy a stake in the struggling firm. This put me in a strategic position. I could now watch from the front row as the company that had fired me was absorbed by my new workplace. Chris and his father's humiliation was complete when I, Mark, was appointed to lead the integration between the two companies. Now, I was back in the same building where I had been dismissed, only this time as a representative of the company that had surpassed the old one. When I crossed paths with Chris in the hallway, I couldn't resist a remark. "I warned you that you weren't ready to handle this, Chris. And now look where we are." Chris tried to respond, but no words came out. He looked smaller, defeated, a reflection of someone who had allowed pride and envy to consume him. And me? I walked away, without looking back, knowing I had won the battle fairly, and that, no matter how bitter the memories, they now belong to the past. A few years have passed since that dramatic ending, and a lot has changed since then. Today, I am known in the industry as one of the most renowned and respected negotiators, someone who understands the nuances of every market and, most importantly, knows how to build relationships with clients and partners. My journey wasn't easy, but every challenge I faced, especially the clash with Chris, taught me a great deal about resilience and strategy. The company I work for now has thrived remarkably. With my help, we've expanded into new markets, grown our client base, and closed deals that once seemed impossible. Recognition followed in the form of a position as Director of International Negotiations, something I never imagined when I first started in this field. My influence has grown so much that I'm frequently invited to speak at conferences, international events, and interviews about managing complex negotiations and turning struggling companies around. Meanwhile, Chris's path took a very different turn. The arrogance he once displayed so proudly became the cause of his downfall. After being removed from his father's company, he tried to start his own business, hoping to prove that he could succeed on his own. But he quickly discovered that running a company is far more challenging than he anticipated. Lacking the necessary experience, the ability to nurture client relationships, and above all, the humility to learn from his mistakes, he faced a string of failures. His initial ventures quickly racked up debts, and the reputation he built by alienating former clients followed him wherever he went. The market's lack of trust was a blow he couldn't overcome. While I was sealing million-dollar deals, Chris was drowning in loans and desperate attempts to keep his businesses afloat. News of the bankruptcy of his latest venture spread through business circles, making it clear that he had been undone by his own incompetence. The irony is that while I accumulated awards and was consistently recognized by my peers, he became an example of what not to do in business. Industry courses and workshops began using him as a classic case study of how pride can destroy a professional. And in some of those lectures, I was there on stage as the counterexample, the one who managed to bounce back and turn a setback into an opportunity for growth. From time to time, I encounter people who still remember what happened between us. They mention how surprising it was to see someone who had been underestimated rise to become a giant in the industry, while the arrogant president's son fell by the wayside. I hold no grudges against Chris. In fact, I almost feel sorry for him. He had every opportunity to learn and grow, but chose to remain blinded by his own vanity. Recently, I heard that he moved to a smaller town, trying to rebuild his life away from the corporate world he once scorned. Meanwhile, I enjoy the comforts of a life I built through hard work, living in a sought-after neighborhood and providing my family with the security I once only dreamed of. Sometimes, when I reflect on everything that happened, I realize that achieving financial success and gaining recognition wasn't the most important part. The real victory was knowing that I overcame the obstacles thrown my way and built something solid and lasting. In the end, Chris became just a distant memory, a reminder that success doesn't depend on a last name, but on dedication, vision, and most importantly, character. Now, every time I walk into an important meeting, I see the respect in the eyes of those around the table. They know they are dealing with someone who has faced the worst and emerged stronger. And for me, that is the ultimate proof that I made the right decision when I left that toxic environment behind. Today, I have no doubt I won, and Chris is a living example of what happens when arrogance clouds one's judgment.